Gonzalez swings, drives it to left field, and let's go on a cowhide joyride in the grandest of fashions.
Hello, RailCats fans, and welcome back to another edition of the RailCats Talk podcast. I'm Kyle Savitich, and I have two series to go over as I had a busy later half of the week last week, so I wasn't really able to do much. And after Wednesday's game, I closed on Thursday, and then I had to spend Father's Day on Friday with my father since I had to work on Sunday. And then on Saturday, we went to a Kenny Chesney concert. And so just a little quick backstory. I just, this is, to me, it's funny. I'm not really going to use any foul language, but if it's younger ears hearing this and if you don't like the word pee or piss, sorry. I'm going to use that because it's just a funny story. Getting into that Saturday. So I'm not a big country fan. Okay, I'm just that it's a one thing that I got drug into. It's just not my thing. There's a couple good songs in country, but the rest of it's just not my taste in music. Anything else really except country, just not my taste in music. So the highlight of the night was going to Soldier Field. Never been there before, and really you don't miss much. Other than if you want RC Cola, you can get RC Cola there. I was shocked by that. I'm a big Dr. Pepper fan. I'm sitting here drinking one anyway, so I was like, oh, they got Dr. Pepper. That's cool. I don't really see that much. And they have RC Cola. I'm just like, okay, this is weird. But anyways, the bathroom situation in the first place was horrendous. It reminded me of like if you ever go to like Tinley Park to a concert and like you have the big barn situation going on, like where all the men go in there and then the women's line is just out the wazoo because it just takes forever. Well, there was women that were filing into the bathroom, and that was just hectic in the first place. But that's not the moral of the story that I'm getting to. Is towards the end of the concert, right? And now, granted, most concerts I've been to, really, I've been to like 2, 3 outside. I should take that back. I've been to a handful more, but majority of them start at like 7 o'clock. You have the one act, maybe two, and then you have the main course going on that gets on about 8, 9 o'clock. Well, this was like a whole shebang because they had 3 or 4 people ahead of Kenny Chesney. So, I mean, people were here for 5, 6 hours at the stadium. And what do you do at a concert? You just get belligerently drunk. And the lady that was a handful of rows down the road of us, so it's like the half wall with the concrete pillar kind of deal, the balcony, at the end of the balcony front row there. And she's just sitting there dancing. I'm like, Vizzy's just going ham, just gone out like a light. And her husband leaves. She's dancing the music, and I look over at my wife, and she points at her. She's like, "Hey, look at that." I'm like, "What?" I'm looking, and I mean, she's getting like real low, like low, like abnormally low. And I'm like, I'm trying to see, like, is she wearing pants? Is she just dancing like that? And she slowly stands up, shimmies to the left, and all you see is a nice wet spot from the top of the concrete slab down to the bottom of it. So that was the highlight of my night. Rather have been watching a RailCats game, but instead I watched a woman piss in a stadium full of roughly 55,000 people, give or take, and not care one bit. That's my disgusting story of that front of it. And then getting into, again, I know I keep bringing it up, but with the complications of last podcast that I had talking about being on the Indie Ball report. So what happened was that the audio on my end worked, but the audio for Ryan and Nick did not work. Don't know how that happened. And technology is a weird thing. I don't know if it's a me thing or if it was just like a one-off situation. Anyways, Nick salvaged most of it. I mean, it was only 30 minutes and we roughly talked for close to an hour and a half. So I think Nick did a great job at editing it, but it was also edited in a way to like where the little bit of the backstory of the night, which I kind of gave backstory of the night in last week's podcast, but the backstory in this week is it wasn't your normal like, here's a question, answer it, got done answering it, here's another question. Like there was just a lot going on. They were kind of watching the game and they were communicating among themselves, and we were just kind of like it was like just one big conversation. So a lot of the remarks that I made in it weren't necessarily like a question and answer. It was just kind of like a free flowing thing. So the way Nick kind of edited in the questions, it may seem like it's jumping all over the place, but he did a wonderful job and a great job of trying to tie everything in, and that's not an easy thing to do, is take an hour and a half conversation and try to edit it in a handful of things. I know there was a couple of things that I said, like Ty Tiedemann, he came from Spire City. He didn't come from the Frontier League or the Pioneer League. That was Peyton Long. I meant to say Peyton Long, but I just couldn't get the words out to say it, and I said Ty Tiedemann instead. And you'll probably hear me say that it was two of his rougher starts. So I said terrible. I know I was a little blunt with that. But that was also the case of what he didn't do in the last two games that he pitched in between in that interview. So I know Nick said something about Wednesday potentially doing a standalone for it. Whatever the case may be, I'm hoping to get back on with them Thursday. He mentioned something about Thursday, so we'll see how that works out. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, I'll be a little bit better prepared. For me, I'm always, when I first meet people and I'm either one of two people, I'm either over the top with anxiety and nervousness, or I'm so conserved that I'm not wanting to speak necessarily. Like the introvert kind of comes out in me. So like that whole conversation that we were having, I was already amped up from the game. So just jumping into the conversation right away, I was already amped up. So it may not seem like my normal self to a certain extent, just because of the situation that we kind of put ourselves in, or I put myself in, and not like taking a chill pill and relaxing and understanding the situation. But that's beside the point. Getting into the podcast itself, we are going to talk about the releases, signings, injury update, and talking about the Lincoln Saltdogs and the Milkmen series. And then I think I'm going to kind of look at a little bit of like the Pioneer League. I know there's one pitcher that like I've been eyeballing that would be a good trade piece of some sort, or something along the lines of, I think we need to start making moves to other leagues instead of just releasing and retaining people from that point. But getting into the releases, Brandon Fields was released. He played 9 games, 21 at-bats, 1 run, 4 hits, 1 double, 1 triple, 1 RBI, 1 walk, 13 strikeouts, slashed a 191, a 261, a 333, an OPS of 594. Being 23 years old, and having a good, how should I say it, a good, he has good potential, right? And I think a lot of the issues with Brandon was that he was newer, and he's not not used to professional atmosphere. And when I was introducing myself to Anthony, Chuck was in the middle of having a conversation with Anthony, which kind of helped break the ice a little bit on my end, because I kind of inserted myself. But that's beside the point. Chuck was talking about how Brandon had him just for a little bit until he could find a host family person to go to outside of Chuck. And it seemed like Brandon was struggling with the professionalism of professional baseball and still in the draft league or the college atmosphere and not fully understanding the situation that he's putting himself that he is in. I think he has a lot of raw talent. I think he is going to be a valuable piece probably in the Pioneer League, and that's why I bring up the Pioneer League, because I thought he would have been a good trade asset for like a top end pitcher and like a Patrick Maybach, who's like 26. You have a Robert Dazinski, who I don't have all their ages, but I'm just like, these are like the top pitchers in the league. Maybach is like the top pitcher as far as like ERA. He has a 3.16 ERA and a WHIP of 117. Dunsky has a 115 WHIP. His ERA is a 4.15, but like these are starting pitchers that are appearing in games, that are winning games, that are part of good teams, and they have a lower, the WHIP, and I think that's a big thing that we're running into with the RailCats is the amount of the WHIP to the walk ratio, and you look here and they have 25 innings pitched, they've given up 24 hits, but they've only walked 6 people. Like, the Pioneer League is such an offensively driven league that when you find these pitchers, I think that's where you want to start maybe looking at that, because the numbers may not be so inflated. And even going to the Frontier League, if you want to argue the Frontier League, the aspect of, though, that's going to be a better competition or a better idea of what kind of pitcher you're getting. I'm getting sidetracked off of, but I'm just being able to use like a Brandon Fields for a piece for an older Pioneer player and rotating a younger player to get that experience in the Pioneer League, and maybe a year or two down the road he improves and maybe he wants to come back or something along those lines. I think having some kind of piece to attaching an asset to another asset in interleagues kind of helps. I would think would help kind of build relationships. So it could be one of those, I have a younger player that may not be ready for here, but you have an older player who's maybe needs to maybe make that next step, and these are both needs that we need to make. So it's just one of those situations. Getting into catcher Mike Galino, 27, 5 games, 13 at bats, 2 runs, 2 hits, 1 RBI, 1 walk, 7 strikeouts, 154 batting average, on base percentage of 267, slugging of 154 for an OPS of 421. He wasn't really going to play much or any behind Quintana. Quintana is just producing at a rate that the small slivers that Galino was getting, he necessarily wasn't going to be replaced. And I think it was just being 27. I think he just wanted to call it quits. I was told he wanted to retire. Nothing wrong with that. You're 27. Sometimes you just got to turn around and reevaluate what you want to do, and not being able to play as much, that's kind of a big, bump in the road, and you can't really do nothing about that. That's one of those, all right, just get rid of them. It's fine. Then next one is going to be Nico Pinazzi, 24. And I was surprised actually by his age at 24. Like, I know with Kansas City, the reason he got released with Kansas City was because they needed to make a roster spot for an MLB player. He was low man in the total poll. I don't know what happened when he got to Gary, which there's some speculation, which I will get into once we get through everything on that front. But that could have been a potential one of those, another asset to go to the Frontier League or the Pioneer League that you could have tried to trade off versus releasing. No, I'm not saying I don't. Maybe Lamar has tried to trade these players off and just no one's biting on it. I'm not inside enough to know that. But looking at Panazzi, 6 games, ERA of 15-12, 8.81 innings pitched, 11 hits given up, 14 runs given up, 2 home runs, 14 walks, 17 strikeouts, 3 batters hit, a whip of 3. Hits per 9, 11.9, walks per 9 of 15.1, strikeouts per 9 of 18.4. Rough. Those are rough numbers. And realistically, that last game that he played, he just looked off. His jersey was coming undone. He was battling with his belt. He just looked flustered. And I think he kind of knew that, like, this was his last hurrah, and I think the pressure just maybe got to him. I liked seeing an Italian player. You don't see a lot of those. I hope him the best. I hope that he finds himself a game again and is able to play in professional sports again, or in professional baseball, and find himself a home, because I do like to see, like, those kind of international players coming in and trying to grow the sport for themselves, but grow the sport in their country. I think baseball is one of those sports that could or can be like a soccer, because realistically, you just need a bat and something to hit a rock, or not a rock, but I'm just saying you need something to swing and something to hit on that aspect. So I hope him the best, and I hope he figures something out. It just kind of sucks that he didn't pan out in Gary, and I was high on him because of his ability that he had with Kansas City, and the reasoning behind him getting released wasn't a bad reason. Chris Irwin placed on the disabled list. I really hope this doesn't lead to a career-ending injury that's going to stop him from playing. He's 28. If it's another bad arm injury, you're looking at the beginning of the year again next year. He's going to be 29, going into 30, because he was born in August, so he'll turn 29 at the end of the season, and so on and so forth. So I hope that it's something that he can recover from. I really wish that he wasn't utilized until this point in the year, because that was the original slated timeline, and I think it should have been more of a relief role instead of a starting pitching role. I think he was starting to find his game, and it kind of just sucks that that's how it all plays out. So I hope a speedy recovery, and I hope we figure everything out, and he's able to play again. But it just that kind of hurts not having him in the rotation. Looking at the new signings, catcher Edwards Cooper, 26. He's played 2 games with Gary so far, 5 at bats, 1 hit, 1 strikeout, 200s across the board, a 400 OPS. He's played 136 games, 362 at bats, 41 runs scored, 60 hits, 9 doubles, 1 strikeout, 8 home runs, 35 RBIs, 4 stolen bases, 2 caught, 48 walks, 140 strikeouts, slashed a 166, 294, and a 262 for an OPS of 575. You're replacing a backup catcher with another backup catcher. Hopefully he's a little bit more defensively sound. The issue is, when I looked at his baseball reference, it didn't look like he had a lot behind the plate. So I don't know if he was a DH role with the Florence Yalls. He played the last 2 years with them. So I'm not sure to exactly get what we're going to get with him. That's just going to be watching him and seeing what I looked at some of his Instagram stuff, and it looked like a lot of him just showing off his arm, popping up and going, and stuff like that. So I'm interested to see, yet again, 26 going to battle with Quintana to figure something out, and maybe there's going to be a steady rotation, just because of the hot days coming up. And now with them being in Winnipeg, it may not necessarily matter, but, just kind of keep him in the rotation of things. You have a reliable catcher that you can put behind the plate, and that can give you something offensively, mostly probably defensively to keep Quintana in the batting rotation, put him as a DH role. Bockley would be that one guy out necessarily. And then we have outfielder Chad Smith, who is a left-handed at bat, which I think the RailCats need more of, because just having that brings it up to 3, because Del Valle is one, I believe Bockley is the other one. I should know this, but I have brain farts every so often. Yes, Bockley is also left-handed, so that brings you with 3 left-handed batters. I think having left-handed batters is a good thing to have in your arsenal, especially with the bullpen being brought in from right field. But looking at Chad Smith, he was drafted by the Texas Rangers in 2015 in the 5th round. Played rookie ball to low to mid A, single A from 15 to 19. Took a 5-year break from 2019 till now. He started the year off with the Long Island Ducks from the Atlantic League. Played 12 games. He played 2 games with Gary so far. He had 3 at bats, 2 strikeouts. In the minors, he slashed a 229, 269, a 446, OPS of 642, 36 doubles, 4 triples, 9 home runs, drove in 67, scored 72 runs, stole 18 bases, got caught 10 times. With Long Island, he played 12 games, slashed a 180, 200, a 282, an OPS of 482, had 1 double, 1 home run, 2 stolen bases. He is a potential speedster. He's 26. He's the younger, not younger, but the mediocre-ish in the realm of there. It could be someone also utilized in the outfield for like a Carlos Rincon, who, you know, maybe defensively it could. And now the thing is I don't want to go to get too don't want to critique Rincon too much, because he has played really good right field, but there has been some times where just like if he had a little bit more speed. So I wonder if this is going to be one of those situations where you have another rotational guy that's a left-handed at bat that you could also utilize in right field if you have like a right-handed pitcher. Want to give Rincon a day break or whatever the case may be. There's a rotation that you're going to have there. That's what I could see out of it. I know you're replacing someone with another person, probably a little bit more experience, having that affiliate ball experience, something that we all know Lamar Rogers loves and likes to bring in. And then the big interesting one for me that I'm curious is Casey Grimm. He was claimed off of waivers from the Saltdogs. He did pitch against the Saltdogs, and it was during the series, so he must have not really had to walk too far across the field to the other side of the dugout. He did pitch in 1 game. He had 1 inning, 1 strikeout. Of all of indie ball, he had 4 seasons, a record of 2-3, 8.08 ERA, 16 games played, 8 started, 53 and 2/3 innings pitched, giving up 75 hits, 48 runs, 13 home runs, 18 walks, 18 strikeouts, 5 batters hit, a whip of 173, hits per 9 of 12.6, home runs per 9 of 2.2, walks per 9 of 3, and strikeouts per 9 is also 3. So this is where it gets interesting for me. So we see the whip and we see how high the whip is. That's an indie ball. And we go to, I went, okay, where's the flaws at here? Okay, hits per 9. That's 12.6. That's a lot of hits that given up. So obviously he's a pitch to contact hitter. We're seeing a lot of those that bring in, but the one that impressed me was the walks per 9 of just 3. Typically, we're seeing close to 6, 7, 8, 9 per 9 of walks, so hopefully he has a little bit better control. He does have some games started, so I wonder if the philosophy that was brought up that I still think Lamar Rogers wants to do, I just don't think it's cycled itself out that way, was having the starting pitcher go 4 or 5 innings, have a longer reliever, and then have a finisher. I think that's what Lamar Rogers the plan has been for him for a handful of years, because that's the way he's always seemed to utilize his team, the pitching staff. But I just don't think the consistency has been there. I mean, your more consistent pitchers, when I look at what we have right now, is a Yohan Valdez, Julio Pinto, and a Nate Alexander for like a reliever aspect of it. Now I know Julio Pinto, his last outing wasn't good at all. I mean, he gave up 4 runs in a 2/3 innings on the Saturday loss to Lincoln. Or there was a Friday loss to Lincoln. Granted, you look at the rest of his outings in Cleburne, he gave up 2 runs in 1 inning, and the last time he gave a run was May 25th against King County, where he ended up getting a loss, but he pitched an inning in 2/3 and only gave up 1 run. So like that's a situation where I don't he's not, other than the 3 walks that he had, like I would say like this was his one terrible outing or his worst outing that he had. So I can't necessarily say that this was it happens, right? It's going to happen to anyone and everyone. How many times do we see our hitters go 0 for 5? That happens more times than not. I know with our pitchers giving up 4 or 5 runs happens more times than not. But with consistent people like this isn't one of those where it's like you like burn the tape on this one. Like it's okay. Just burn the tape. You're fine. Not that concerned about Julio Pinto. I just, there's just a couple. I'm more concerned, or not more concerned. I'm more curious with Casey because his walks per 9 is only 3. That's pretty good for the aspect of what we've kind of seen. I don't know, maybe how. Let me just pull up Julio real quick in Baseball Reference and see kind of where we are, what I'm trying to debate with on this, having a 3, looking at his stats right now. I mean, he has a walk per 9 of 6.2, right? So like he's one of your upper ended. Maybe I guess the best one we should use is probably Yohan, because he has been the more consistent player for the pitching staff, and his walks per 9 is 3.6, and right now Grimm is lower than that. I mean, we could even probably throw in Nate Alexander. His walks per 9 is 5. So, but in Boise, last year he had a 2.9. Like he's showing the consistency that we normally are going to see from them. So I'm not that concerned that the walks per 9 is a lot lower than mostly everyone that we have. Let me go into here. Not the whip. It's not going to show in any of the saber metrics. See, that's why I like it, because I did the walks per 9. Right now, never mind. So the walks per 9 is actually how it rolls out right now. Grimm is at 0, also Valera, but that's beside the point. DNA was at a 2.038, but he's no longer with the team. So Peyton Long is the next one at a 207, and then Valdez at a 3.5, Tiedemann at a 3.7, and Anders Diaz at a 3.9. So once we kind of get into the 4s, that's when I'm kind of like, I don't necessarily like it. But on the flip side, you have a Josh Smith who I think has been pitching really well, and outside of the June 7th Cleburne game where he gave up 3 runs on 3 hits, 1 walk, he's only given up one run, and that was in the 11-7 win over Milwaukee, where he gave up one run. Other than that, he shut the door on everything else that we've seen. Well, I should take that back. The last time before that, we gave up at Sioux City. He gave up 4 runs, but 2 of them were earned. So, like, not necessarily his fault. I'm just saying, like, Josh Smith is also another one of those consistent players that the pitching staff has had. But the issue is when you look at the games, you're not. So let's just, for example, let's just go ahead and transition into the Milwaukee series real quick, and we'll break it down game by game and kind of give a box score update. But just looking how the series itself in general looked, they lost game 1 5-2, won game 2 11-7, lost game 3 8-1, was outscored 20-14. They had 18 hits, and then they gave up 34 hits. Like, that's just not a recipe for success either way. This is a number that I'm going to come back to as the balancing of the scales between the two, which side is necessarily, who would be putting the blame on. But going into this Milwaukee series and knowing the Milwaukee series the way it ended the first time, really losing in extra innings to Milwaukee by 1 run, like, that was a really good series, and that series could have gone flip-flopped either way. And this one, it was one of those where it was the 1 inning giving up the runs, and it spills back to one of those situations. So, like, game 1, RailCats are up 2-0, go to the 5th inning, and Snobbery has a really good game up to the 4th inning. Well, he pitches into the 5th, and he has a couple runners on base. Franklin Perez, he gets hit a handful of times. A couple of those come in, and then Franklin Perez gives up 2 runs. And then Julio Pinto, Valdez, Smith, and Alexander, they all shut the game down. But at the point of the time, I mean, the deficit was only 3 runs. That's what the deficit was only 3 runs. So in that instance, it would be kind of nice to have a little bit more offensive production. You had hits from Diaz, Del Valle, Basabe, Gonzalez, Rincon, Bockley, and Valera had 2 hits in the game, and Marcos Gonzalez was the only one with the extra base hit. Castillo had an RBI sac fly, and then Rincon scored, or he drove in a run as well. So it's one of those situations where you needed a little bit more production. I mean, you had 8 hits, you gave up 10. You're just not capitalizing on some of the runs that you had in that situation, or some of the opportunities that you had. And this just kind of gets into that game 1 of that series was a close game, and it just fell apart because of, again, 1 bad inning that the RailCats always tend to kind of give up. And then, you look at game 2, which is the game they won 11-7, and this one really, this one was a really fun one to be at, because this showed what they can do and what the offensive production could look like if it was consistent throughout. Because realistically, so Chris Irwin starts the game, and he goes 5 innings. He gives up 8 hits and 6 runs. Like, okay, not the best outing from him. He gives up 3 runs in the first inning, and then in the second inning, Gary rallies back, and it's a double, it's a single to bring in Rincon, and Gio Diaz doubles, and you're getting the extra base hits. Rincon and Diaz both have doubles. Marcos Gonzalez hits a grand slam. Carlos Rincon hits a 3-run home run to take the lead, and the RailCats score 2 in the bottom of the second, and then you go to the 5th, and the Milkmen tack on 3 more, but then the RailCats rally off 5 runs, and the next inning they hit the grand slam, they rally off 4 runs, and then it's the bullpen comes in. Pinto, Valdez, Smith, and Alexander come in and shut the door. Like, that's what we're, once the production's there and you're able to close those games out, and it's not the starting pitchers, it's not the second relief pitcher, and the offense is there. Like, this is the kind of games that not saying that I want to see the 11-7 games. We need to see more of like what we kind of saw with Lincoln, was a little bit lower scoring, but having the full offensive or full defensive capability of shutting a game down. And I'll get into the defense as far as fielding wise. I think they've played outstanding. I don't think we've given them enough love, or I haven't given enough love on the defensive side of things, because I think they've played really great defense most all year. But getting into the game 3, losing 8-1, and it's having, you're already down 2-0, but then you get one back in the 4th, and that's all you get, but you still give up 15 hits, and the 5th inning rolls around and you give up five runs, right? Peyton Long goes 5 in a 3rd inning, and he gives up 9 hits, 5 runs. Not the best start. His start was good until that point. He left a couple runners on. Steven Knapp comes on. He's new. I don't think I mentioned him, actually. Steven Knapp, I don't know how he missed him. But he has that submarine style, a slower delivery, that the 70s, not super fast. So I'm curious to see how that's going to work out. But then it's, Denson Hall comes in, he gives up 1 hit. Walda comes in, he gives up a hit, and he strikes out 3. Denson Hall strikes out 2. Like, if you're gonna be a relief pitcher and you're just gonna give up a hit or a walk every inning that you go up, I'm fine with that. Now, eventually you're going to get bit. That 1 hit's going to turn into a home run, or, you're going to get bit eventually along the lines. But I'm okay with you just giving up 1 hit if you're not going to give up any runs. Like, I'm fine with that. Get your 1 walk in. There's a fine line between when you look at the numbers and what the actual game is itself. And it's hard to look at the numbers for relief pitchers because sometimes those numbers get really inflated. Like a Steven Knapp, who, his ERA is at I think it's averaging out at 26.99 at the time of the game, and I think he brought it down to a 4.91 because he pitched against Lincoln 3 innings and gave up 2 walks and didn't give up a run. So, like, you can't always look at the numbers. Somebody have to go into the game and see exactly what goes on, because not all the time is the numbers actually reflecting what the pitcher has done consistently. Now, granted, it's only 2 games. The consistency is not there. You're not going to see the consistency in 2 games. It's 3 or 4 games on the road to see what kind of consecutive. But having 3 innings, going 3 innings as a relief pitcher, it puts you in that realm of what we're seeing from a Valdez, from a Pinto, from a Nate Alexander. Like, the consistent innings through in and throughout, that could be one of those. So, like, the pitching might get there, but again, we go through the games, and that was the 8-1 loss. And you look at here, Valeris hits 1, gets 1 hit. Del Valle goes 3 for 4. Rincon goes 2 for 3, and then everyone else is offers. You're not seeing that full production from everyone in the lineup because the numbers are starting to slip. Right now at the end of the Milwaukee series, you're looking at Basabe, Gonzalez are all above 300, and then Del Valle is at a 288, and then that's a God is above a 262. That's everyone that's above the 250 mark. Valera's at the 250 mark, but you have LG Castillo underneath it, Rincon underneath it, and Quintana that was underneath it. So like, you just kind of take that into the remembrance here a little bit. And so when we go into the Lincoln series, the first game you lose 6-2, and this was one of those where it's a pitching duel. Ty comes out. He pitches really well, and he gives up 1 run on 5 hits. He's gonna give up hits. Like, that's just a common theme. Like, he's gonna give up hits. It's a matter of if the hits are just happening to find holes, and are they consistently gaining hits that are finding those holes, and you just can't control that. If it's going to turn into one of those situations where he isn't giving up the crazy amount of hits that are coming together, you're going to get games like this where he's going to give up a hit an inning. I'm fine with that, right? You give me a hit an inning, you give up 1 run in five innings, I'm okay with that. You'll get them. It's just telling me if you pitch 10 innings, you're going to give up 2 hits. Like, I'm fine with that. You had the 3 walks. Okay, every other inning you're giving up a walk. 4 strikeouts, I'll take it. You're fine. But then you have the 1 bad inning where you give up 4 runs, and Julio Pinto has his 1 bad inning. Like, that part sucks, right? You're just like, oh, you had that 1 bad inning. But on the flip side, you only scored 2 runs, and the 2 runs come from Basabe and LG Castillo, and Basabe hits a triple. Castillo goes a 2 for night with an RBI and a strikeout. Like, but then Diaz gets a hit, Basabe gets a hit, Rincon gets a hit, Edwards, Cooper he got a hit, Contreras came in, he got a hit. I'll get into it. But anyways, that's it's one of those, the consistency throughout just isn't there. When you look at the Lincoln side of things, you have 2 players. One player goes 3 for 4 with a run and an RBI, a walk, and a strikeout. And you have another player go 2 for 4 with a run and a walk. Like, you're getting on base. You don't see a lot of 0-fers. You have an 0 for 3. But you have another 2 0 for 3s and an 0 for 1. But that is what it is at that point. And then you kind of look at your statistics for there. They have Takis is at a 321 batting average, Connors at a 206. Henson, I don't know how many he's played, but he has a 361. They have a handful of people that are above the 250 versus our numbers just kind of keep going down a tad bit. Getting into game 2, the 4-1 loss, this was one of those where you have the 1 bad inning in the second inning, and it's Sanabria who pitches, and he goes 5 innings, but he gives up 4 runs on 6 hits, 1 walk, and 5 strikeouts. He just has that 1 bad inning, and I believe it just comes from, for example, Hewitt gets a single. He advances to second because of an error by the right fielder, who would have been Rincon in right field at that point, to move the runner, to move Connors, who started off, to single it to third. So you have 3 outs to get at least 1 run in, and you give up a single to right field, and Connors comes in, Hewitt comes in. Realistically, you could probably just scored 1 run on that, because you would have had 1 person sitting on first or second and 1 person sitting on first. The errors kind of tend to come together, and then Drew Devine hits a double, and then you have a strikeout, and then Takis singles to right, that's scoring 2 runs. But it's just that 1 bad inning, and then there's just no offensive production. Besides a Rincon home run. Diaz goes 0 for 3, Valera goes 1 for 4, Basabe goes 0 for 4, Gonzalez goes 1 for 4, Rincon goes 2 for 2 with a run, an RBI, and a walk. Del Valle goes 0 for 3, LG Castillo goes 0 for 3, Quintana goes 0 for 3, Bockley goes 0 for 3. Like, the numbers are now starting to deflate down, just because you're just the hitting and the pitching aren't aligned. I mean, when looking at the Lincoln series, before I get, I'll just go into Game 3 before I get into what I'm going to talk about. In Game 3, this is one of those games that if the pitching aligns and the offense just gives you enough, you're going to win games. The 2-1 games, the 1-run games, the low scoring games is the games that you're going to have to win. And, you only have 2 hits, and the 2 hits are home runs, which in the grand scheme of things, it's nice to see the power numbers getting there for that. And the home runs in this situation is nice because you're not getting a lot of hits, and when you do get hits, they're more production scoring runs. But that's not a recipe for success for the entire year. You just can't do that. So Anders Diaz comes in, he pitches, he goes 5 innings. So this is what we're talking. It's going to be 5 innings. Probably starting pitchers going 5, 6 innings is what you're probably going to get out. He gives up 3 hits, 1 run, 4 walks, 3 strikeouts. Don't really like the amount of walks, but hey, end of the day, you get the win. Perez comes in and he pitches really well. And, that's one of his better games that he's pitched. Most of them, you have some kind of run production with it. Grimm comes in and he strikes out 1 batter. Josh Smith, Nate Alexander comes in for the save. That's the kind of production that you may need to see. If that's the lineup that we're going to get, if we're going to have outside of the 1 bad inning from Julio Pinto, you're more than likely going to see Julio Pinto, Yohan Valdez, Josh Smith, Nate Alexander. Now, would it be nice, and this is where I can understand the philosophy change a little bit, if your starting pitcher goes 5 innings and you allow, let's just say, a Yohan Valdez to go 2, maybe 3 innings, depending on the situation. Then you rotate it again with someone else that can do that, maybe a Julio Pinto, a Josh Smith, or just depending on how you're rolling it up. If you're wanting a middle reliever into a setup guy to a closer, which Nate Alexander has been that back end guy, are you looking at 3 innings? You go 5 innings, then to the 8th, and then you close it out with Nate Alexander, or are you looking to go 2 more innings? Or maybe do you want to bump it from 5 innings for the starters down to the 4 innings? But I realistically think your starting pitching needs to at least go 5 innings. If that's what you're going to give it 5 innings. And if I just think there needs to be a decent rotation between all of the different relievers. You have your group A and your group B, right? Your 1A, your 1B situation, or you just have a handful of people that can go 2 or 3 innings and have Nate Alexander close it out, and then you have your guys that aren't necessarily producing at the level you want them to be in quote unquote blowout games, or games that are a little bit out of hand, and you can sacrifice a couple runs just to relieve someone. Maybe that pushes maybe a longer rotation of some sort, having someone that can go, maybe pushing it instead of a 5-man rotation. Maybe you're looking at a 6-man rotation, maybe something along the lines of that. I just don't, it's so hard. That's the issue, is when you look at the underlying numbers of everything, it's that 1 bad inning that the pitching gives up, and it's either they're so far in the hole that the offense can't catch themselves back up because they're so far behind. When we look here, so getting back into the Lincoln series real quick, they were outscored 11-5. They had 13 hits given up. Or they had 13 hits but gave up 22 hits. Like you're getting out hit in each series. So you should, the numbers, when you look at the offense and defensive numbers, most to all their categories are in the bottom, like bottom, or just they're close to the bottom. Chicago surprisingly is more at the bottom than I really thought they would be. But when you complement struggling offense with struggling pitching, it's not a good recipe for success. And especially a Lincoln Saltdog series where it could have been flipped, where Gary right now could be 13-22 versus 11-23. I just there's a little bit of me that wonders one of two things. Me personally, if you were to give me the reins of the American Association right now, I would get rid of the 4 playoff teams. Or, yeah, 4 playoff teams. I would knock one down to make it 3. The reason for that is you're taking the top half of the league going in. And when you look at it, at this aspect of it, so right now, Gary is 9 games back from first place. They right now are 5 games back from a playoff spot. But if you were only take the top 3, they would be 7.5 games back. And the Dogs, instead of being in a playoff spot, they would be 2.5 games back. Like, it's a little bit different. I think it would spread itself out. You just have the 2 and 3 seed play each other, and how so on and so forth. I don't really like the 1 and 2, the top 2, because of there's a bigger separation. And by this time, if there was just 1 and 2, I guarantee you a lot of these players would be done. I just think they would just be like, we're getting 9 games back. Like, it's just gonna be hard to get back into it, because you have to try to topple Milwaukee or King County or even Cleveland. Like, there's 3 teams that you're gonna have to try to topple that I just don't think they're capable of doing at this point. I'm gonna call it what it is and what I see. I just don't think that it is on paper. Is the talent there? Yes, but is the production there? No. So I can't look at a pile of crap and say, wow, that's a great pile of crap. No, it's a pile of crap. So when the numbers and everything line up, now granted, you can change my mind. We're getting into June. The weather's starting to warm up. We're going to see more balls going, and maybe that's when the offensive production is going to come around. I just there's too many. And this leads into the situation of who here is necessarily, and this gets into a couple things. You know, last year, the year before, there was I noticed, a lot of people noticed that the bullpen or the pitching rotation, not the rotation, but the selection of when to take someone in and out was a bigger deal. You know, I think his first year, Lamar Rogers left people in too long. And then last year, I think he took people out too quick. This year, I've been told that, now I don't know if it's Lamar or if it's Kent, changing how pitchers are pitching. Granted, I am not a pitching coach. I don't fully understand. I can understand, like, if a mechanic's wrong, trying to fix a mechanic portion of it. But if you have a guy that just wants to throw heat, and he wants to be a mano-a-mano, throwing heat, let him do that. If that's what makes him successful, do that. If it's a guy that throws nothing but sliders, changeups, and a four-seam fastball, let him do. Like I said, I don't know what it is. I also think some of the issue is, so the umpiring crew that we have, that it's the same people. Like, it's just the same people. And I get it, you're not gonna. I don't want to harp on the umpiring crew, but sometimes it's more inconsistent than consistent. I also don't think Guillermo is really good at framing. It's a lot of, catching it and really like over exaggerating instead of just a nice little like you catch it and it's subtle. Like you can't how I looked at it, even like when I was umping to a certain extent, was if you have the strike zone. So how do I just make like this the notebook for the people that are on YouTube can see is the strike zone, right? So if I were to see, granted, if the ball was here, it would be a ball, but sometimes depending on where the catcher's sitting, you may not always see it. So if I see a catcher, if the ball's close and I just see him kind of do a subtle move, more than likely I'm going to call that a strike. But if I see a guy go here and then all the way across over here, that's a ball. Like, you're just over exaggerating. Like, if you take it way out here and you try to swoop it in, I'm gonna call that a ball. So like some of those ones that he goes, and I know he tries to catch it, like the ball might be right down the middle, but the way he swings his mitt, it makes it up the top, right corner. So it's one of those situations where it's like if you're not really getting a good read on the ball, or if it's a breaking ball, whatever the case may be, you're not getting a good read and the catcher's trying to frame it. If you over exaggerate too much, more than likely the umpire is going to assume that you thought it was a ball, so you're just trying to over exaggerate it a little bit. So I would like to see a little bit more subtle movement, not such a big movement. I think that would help some of the pitching of the control, but I also think that a lot of the pitchers get stressed out and they put themselves in situations like a Nico Panazzi, who, like I said, when his last inning, the last game that he played, he was messing with his belt. His shirt was coming untucked. He just looked flustered. And when you look flustered, that's the worst thing in the world for baseball, because baseball is 90% mental. And if you can't get the mental aspect of it down, it's just going to be very difficult to get everything going. Looking real quick, I just want to run through the roster real quick as far as just updating stats. So looking at the averages from top to bottom, Gonzalez 289, Basabe 287, Rincon 263, Gio Diaz 250, Del Valle 246, Valera 244, Castillo 237, Quintana 211, Edwards 200, Bockley 182, Contreras 154. Sierra's hurt right now, so he's at a 128, and then Smith hasn't had the hit yet. I don't. There's a couple pieces to me that think that maybe moving. I know that he likes Contreras for the power numbers, but yet again, I don't know. I mean, Bockley's been around for a while. He does incur more walks, so I do like that aspect of it. I'm just saying here, there's not a lot. There's 4 people that are above either at 250 and above. Like, that's just not a recipe for success. For example, we'll take King County, who's in the top of the division. There is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players that are under the 250 mark. Everyone else is a 291 and above, right? That's the kind of production that we're just missing out on. And they only have 24 home runs, right? That's why, just because you can hit home runs, like the RailCats right now, they have 30 home runs. Home runs, to my point, is home runs can't be everything. They can win you games, but if you are batting, granted, Rincon's batting a 263, but imagine if he was batting close to a 300. How many more RBIs he would have, how many potentially home runs he would have. He's not striking out a whole bunch. he has 19 strikeouts. He had 31 hits. He's drawing walks. He has 9 walks. He's gotten hit by 2 pitches. He's the RBI leader, and that's another thing is we're just not getting we only have 2 players that have RBIs in the 20s. That's Rincon and Gonzalez, and LG Castillo's two behind that. Then you have Basabe, then you have Gio Diaz, and then it's Quintana and Valera all at 11, and then it's just a big drop off from there. Again, if we go to if they would pop up for me, sorry, it was glitching out. You go to a King County and you look at their RBI. And now, granted, here it's not as open. You have Davis, who has 28 RBIs, and you have Lott and Smith and a handful of other ones that aren't at. You only have one person at the 28. Who's on the top at. So I guess that one kind of mutes my point a little bit. But what I'm saying is they're having the batting average, they're driving in runs, and the runs are more even throughout because you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 that are in double digits, and you only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 3 off. 7 in double digits for the RailCats, but then when you really look at it, there's a handful that it goes from Valera from 11 to Sierra down to 5. Now Del Valle really hasn't been in just quite as long. I mean, he's only has 16 games played, and he's at 5. To get more into it, he's probably gonna boost those numbers up. I'm just saying there isn't much production as far as everyone contributing when they're supposed to. We're not getting the bottom of the line. When it goes from 5 to 4 to 3, 1, and then a bunch of zeros, that's not much production that we're going to get out of that. Pitching, we know that the pitching is an issue. That's a long list of things that, I'm not going to get too crazy into. But yeah, I think that that wraps up just kind of talking about it, and hopefully it was a little bit better put together than normal my other podcasts were. I felt better about this podcast than I have in the past couple ones. I know it just sometimes it gets a little rushed because I don't necessarily have the time, and I was able to do an hour one because I don't have to work on Tuesday, so I'm able to do this and wake up tomorrow and edit it and so on and so forth and make it a better podcast, hopefully. But yeah, so series starts today. Well, tomorrow, but by the time this comes out, it'd be today against Winnipeg, up in Winnipeg. Just real quick, I guess I can tell you where they are at in the standings. They are in third, 2.5 games back from first. They are 19 and 15. Logan Watkins has turned that one around, so it's going to be a tough battle. It's going to be interesting. It should be a good one. But yeah, that's going to wrap it up for me. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, whatever. RailCats Talk, wherever you get everything else from. So yeah, that wraps it up. Have a good rest of your day, rest of your evening, whenever you're watching this, and go Cats.
The 0-2. Swing and a miss, strike 3. Wrap this one up in green and white.